The first bell hadn't rung yet. Students poured into Ashford Middle School from every direction. Backpacks bounced, lockers slammed. Teachers stood in the hallways greeting sleepy teenagers. Inside the school health office, Nurse Jennifer Hamilton organized bandages, inhalers, and stacks of student health forms. She had learned one thing after 8 years as a school nurse. If the morning started quietly, it usually wouldn't stay that way. Within the first hour, someone would scrape a knee, someone else would forget their asthma inhaler, and at least one student would swear they were definitely dying because of a mild stomachache. Jennifer smiled to herself. She loved every minute of it, long before becoming a school nurse. Jennifer had lived a completely different life. She had served 12 years in the military as a special operations medic. After leaving the service, she'd worked in emergency medicine before eventually accepting the quieter position at Ashford Middle School. At least, people assumed it was quieter. Jennifer knew better. Children created emergencies adults never imagined. One moment, everything was peaceful. The next, someone had swallowed a game piece. She glanced toward the framed photograph sitting quietly on her desk. It showed 5 soldiers wearing dusty uniforms, all smiling despite exhaustion. The faces had faded slightly over the years. She rarely looked at the picture for long. Some memories deserved respect, not constant revisiting. At exactly 8:17 a.m., the office door burst open. Nurse Jennifer, 12-year-old Ethan Parker, hurried inside. His backpack looked twice his size. His breathing came in short bursts. Jennifer immediately stood. "What happened?" "I'm okay." He held up both hands quickly. "I didn't get hurt." Jennifer relaxed slightly. "Good. So, why are you running?" Ethan reached into his hoodie pocket. "My grandpa told me to give you something." He placed a small object carefully onto her desk. It landed with a soft metallic sound. Jennifer looked down. Her heartbeat stopped. It was an old military dog tag. Worn, scratched, weathered by years of use. She had seen thousands of dog tags during her military career, but this one felt different, very different. She slowly picked it up, turned it over, and read the engraved name. Her fingers froze instantly. The room became completely silent. She whispered the words almost unconsciously. "Michael Donovan." Ethan looked surprised. "You know him?" Jennifer couldn't answer, because she absolutely did, not just casually, not from paperwork, not from a photograph. Michael Donovan had once saved her life, 20 years earlier, high in the mountains of Afghanistan. Jennifer had been a newly assigned combat medic. Young, capable, but inexperienced. Their convoy had been struck by an improvised explosive device. Chaos erupted instantly. Smoke, dust, gunfire, confusion. Jennifer remembered trying to reach a wounded teammate. Then, another explosion. The blast threw her nearly 20 feet. She remembered struggling to breathe, trying to stand, unable to. Then, someone appeared through the smoke. Sergeant First Class Michael Donovan. Without hesitation, he dragged her behind cover, shielded her with his own body, then returned to rescue 2 more soldiers before reinforcements arrived. 3 weeks later, he volunteered for another mission, one he never came back from. Official reports listed him as missing in action. No body recovered, no confirmation, only questions. Jennifer had carried those unanswered questions for nearly 2 decades. And now, somehow, his dog tag rested in her hand. She looked back at Ethan. "Where? Did your grandfather get this?" Ethan shrugged. "He said he found it years ago, cleaning out some old boxes. He told me to bring it to the school nurse." Jennifer frowned. "He knew I worked here." "No. He just said..." Ethan paused. "He said if the nurse's name was Jennifer Hamilton, she'd understand." Jennifer felt every hair on her arms stand up. Michael Donovan knew her. Of course he did. But Ethan's grandfather? How could he possibly know her name? She carefully looked at the second line engraved beneath the name. Army serial number, blood type, religion. Everything exactly as military regulations required. No mistake, no replica. This was Michael's actual identification tag. The one he'd worn overseas. The one officially listed among missing equipment after his disappearance. Jennifer looked back at Ethan. "I think," she paused. "I need to meet your grandfather." Ethan smiled. "He said you'd probably say that." Outside, the first school bell echoed through the hallways. Students hurried toward class. The ordinary school day continued, but inside the nurse's office, one small piece of weathered metal had reopened a chapter of Jennifer Hamilton's life she believed had been closed forever, and she had no idea that discovering who had kept that dog tag safe all these years would change everything she thought she knew about the past. Jennifer stared at the dog tag for several long seconds. The metal felt heavier than it should, not because of its weight, because of everything it represented. She carefully placed it back on her desk. "Ethan?" He looked up. "Yes, Nurse Jennifer." "Can your grandfather come here after school?" Ethan smiled. He already said he would. Jennifer blinked. "He did. He told me if the nurse recognizes the name, tell her I'll be waiting at 3:30. A strange feeling settled over her, almost like stepping into a story someone else had already written. The rest of the morning became a blur. Jennifer treated a 6th grader with a bloody nose, applied an ice pack to a sprained wrist, helped a diabetic student whose blood sugar had dropped, answered 3 worried phone calls from parents. Outwardly, everything appeared normal. Inside, her thoughts never left the dog tag. Every quiet moment, her eyes drifted back toward it. At lunchtime, a school counselor, Megan Lewis, walked into the health office carrying 2 sandwiches. You forgot lunch again," Jennifer smiled absent-mindedly. "I did." Megan immediately noticed something was wrong. "You've got that look." Jennifer laughed softly. "What look?" "The one you get whenever you're thinking about something from before." Jennifer hesitated, then quietly slid the dog tag across the desk. Megan picked it up. "Military." Jennifer nodded. "My old unit." Megan turned it over. "Michael Donovan." She looked back at Jennifer. "I've heard that name." Jennifer smiled faintly. "I've never told you much about him." "No, but you've mentioned him." Jennifer leaned back in her chair. "He was 20 years older than me. The first person who made me feel like I actually belonged in the unit. He treated every new medic like family." Megan listened quietly. Jennifer continued. "If something broke, Michael fixed it. If someone was scared, Michael somehow noticed before anyone else. He remembered birthdays. He wrote letters home for soldiers who hated writing. He carried extra candy for the younger guys." Megan smiled. "He sounds impossible." Jennifer laughed. "He kind of was." Then her expression changed. "The day our convoy was hit." She stopped. Some memories still arrived in pieces. "I couldn't move. My lungs wouldn't work. I remember hearing gunfire. I remember thinking, this is how it ends." She looked down at her hands. Then Michael appeared. "What happened?" Jennifer answered almost automatically. "He ignored orders. He ran straight into the open, dragged me behind an armored vehicle, went back for 2 others. And after that," Jennifer became quiet. 3 weeks later, his team disappeared during another mission. No survivors were ever found. No confirmation. No closure." Megan gently placed the dog tag back onto the desk. "And now, this shows up." Jennifer nodded once. "I buried that chapter years ago. I don't know if I'm ready to reopen it." Across town, Ethan's grandfather slowly climbed into his old pickup truck. 78-year-old Thomas Parker moved carefully. Age had slowed him, but not weakened him. On the passenger seat rested an old leather folder. Inside, letters, photographs, military documents, and one faded envelope with Jennifer Hamilton's name written across the front. Thomas looked at it quietly. "About time." He started the engine. Back at school, the afternoon dragged endlessly. Jennifer checked the clock more than she cared to admit. 2:15, 2:42, 3:01. Finally, the dismissal bell rang. Hallways exploded with noise. Students laughed. Teachers called out reminders about homework. Within 15 minutes, the building became almost silent. Jennifer remained sitting behind her desk. The dog tag rested beside her hand. She found herself tracing the engraved letters with her thumb. Exactly the way Michael used to, at precisely 3:30 p.m. Someone knocked gently on the open office door. Jennifer looked up. An elderly man stood there wearing a faded brown jacket and carrying the leather folder. His eyes immediately found the dog tag. "I see Ethan gave it to you." Jennifer stood. "You must be Thomas Parker." He smiled kindly. "I am." She gestured toward the chair. "Please." He sat slowly. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence. "How did you get Michael Donovan's dog tag?" Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the leather folder, carefully removed an old black and white photograph, and handed it to her. Jennifer's breath caught. The photograph showed 4 soldiers standing beside a military transport helicopter. One was unmistakably a Michael Donovan. Another was Thomas Parker, much younger, wearing the same uniform, the same unit patch. Jennifer looked up in disbelief. "You served with him?" Thomas nodded. "For nearly 15 years. Jennifer stared at the picture again, then asked the question she'd carried for 20 years. "What happened?" Thomas looked out the office window for a long moment. When he finally answered, his voice had become much quieter. "The army told you Michael was missing." Jennifer nodded. "They told us the same thing." Thomas slowly folded his hands. "But that," he looked directly into her eyes, "wasn't the whole truth." The room became completely silent. Jennifer realized everything she believed about Michael Donovan's final mission was about to change. Jennifer didn't move. She simply stared at Thomas Parker. "What do you mean? It wasn't the whole truth?" Thomas leaned back slowly. The official report wasn't exactly false. It just wasn't complete. Jennifer felt her pulse quicken. For 20 years, she had accepted what the military told her. Missing in action. Mission failed. No survivors located. End of story. Now, an old man sitting inside a middle school health office was telling her there had been more, much more. Thomas carefully opened the leather folder again. Inside were several neatly organized documents. Most were copies. Some had clearly been handled hundreds of times. He removed one yellowed map. Jennifer immediately recognized it. The mountain region where Michael's team had disappeared. Thomas placed a finger on one small valley. "Our convoy wasn't supposed to go here." He tapped another location several miles away. "This was the original mission." Jennifer studied the markings. "So why did you change routes?" Thomas looked down. "Because someone needed help." He took a slow breath. There was a humanitarian medical camp. Mostly local families. They'd been caught between 2 armed groups. Our command received word that children were trapped there. Jennifer frowned. "I'd never heard about that." Thomas smiled sadly. "Almost nobody did. It wasn't public. The special operations team received new orders. Protect the civilians. Evacuate whoever could still travel. Provide emergency medical care until helicopters arrived." Jennifer nodded slowly. "That sounds like Michael." Thomas laughed quietly. "It was. He volunteered before anyone finished giving the briefing." Thomas pointed toward another location on the map. "This ridge. Our convoy reached it just before sunset. Then everything changed." Jennifer waited. There were far more civilians than expected. Nearly 70. Most were elderly. Many were children. Several had severe injuries. Jennifer closed her eyes briefly. She already knew exactly what Michael would have done. He would have stayed. Thomas continued. "The helicopters couldn't land before dark. So we established a temporary medical station." Jennifer looked up immediately. "A triage center." Thomas smiled. "Exactly. And Michael was running most of it." Jennifer wasn't surprised. Even overseas, even in combat, Michael somehow always found himself treating people before thinking about himself. Thomas's expression slowly darkened. About an hour after sunset, the first mortar round landed. Jennifer's stomach tightened. The room seemed smaller somehow. Thomas continued quietly. "The enemy had spotted the camp. They didn't care who was there. Soldiers, children, civilians. It didn't matter. Jennifer remembered Michael's voice from years earlier. The mission is never just the mission. Sometimes protecting people becomes the mission. She hadn't fully understood it then. She did now. Thomas looked toward the window. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. Michael organized the evacuation. Not because he was ordered to, because nobody else could think clearly anymore. Jennifer could almost picture it. Chaos, smoke, injured civilians, panicked children. Michael moving calmly through all of it, exactly as he always had. Thomas opened another envelope. This one contained several photographs. Jennifer carefully examined them. One showed temporary medical tents. Another showed soldiers handing bottled water to local children. Then, she froze. The final photograph showed Michael kneeling beside a little girl with a bandaged leg. He was smiling, just as he always smiled. Calm, patient, completely focused on the child in front of him. Jennifer whispered, "I've never seen these." Thomas nodded. "Very few people have." She looked back at him. "What happened after the attack?" Thomas became silent again. For several seconds, he simply stared at the table. Finally, he answered. "The helicopters arrived, but not all at once. There wasn't enough room." Jennifer already knew where this was going. Someone would have to stay behind. Someone always did. Thomas looked directly into her eyes. The first helicopter could only take civilians. So Michael loaded every child first. Jennifer smiled faintly. "Of course he did. He even carried 2 of them himself." Thomas nodded. "When the helicopter was full, there was still 1 wounded boy left." Jennifer held her breath. "The pilot said there wasn't enough weight capacity." "What did Michael do?" Thomas answered quietly. "He stepped off." Jennifer closed her eyes. She already knew Michael had given away his own seat. Again, exactly what she would have expected him to do. Thomas's voice became almost a whisper. The helicopter lifted off. The second one. He stopped. It never arrived. Silence settled over the room. Jennifer slowly opened her eyes. "So Michael?" Thomas nodded. "He stayed behind with 8 soldiers, and nearly 40 civilians." Jennifer felt her chest tighten. This wasn't the story she had been told, not even close. For 20 years, she believed Michael had disappeared during combat. Now she was learning. His last confirmed decision wasn't fighting. It was giving his place on the rescue helicopter to an injured child. Thomas carefully reached into the folder one last time. There was one more thing. He placed a sealed military envelope on the desk. Across the front, in faded handwriting, Jennifer read 3 simple words. For Jennifer Hamilton. Her hands began trembling for the first time that day. Michael had written her a letter, and somehow, after 20 years, it had finally found its way to her. Jennifer stared at the envelope. 20 years. For 20 years, this single piece of paper had existed somewhere in the world. Waiting, she carefully turned it over. The military seal had never been broken. Thomas quietly said, "I promised him." Jennifer looked up. "What?" "He handed me that letter the morning before the mission." Thomas smiled sadly. "He said, if anything happens, make sure Jennifer gets this." Jennifer swallowed hard. "You kept it all this time?" Thomas nodded. "I tried to find you. I really did." He gave a tired laugh. "You left the military. Changed hospitals twice. Eventually became a school nurse. I lost track." Jennifer looked down at the envelope. "So how did you find me?" Thomas smiled. "My grandson. Ethan transferred here this summer. One day he came home talking about the nicest school nurse he'd ever met." Jennifer looked confused. "He mentioned your name," Thomas continued. "When he said Jennifer Hamilton, I honestly thought I was hearing things." He looked toward the dog tag. "I knew it had to be you." Jennifer carefully slid one finger beneath the old seal. For just a moment, she hesitated. Opening it somehow felt permanent, like saying goodbye all over again. Thomas quietly stood. "I'll give you a minute." Jennifer shook her head. "No. If you've carried this for 20 years, you should hear it too." Thomas slowly sat back down. Jennifer opened the envelope. Inside, folded military stationery. 3 handwritten pages. The ink had faded slightly, but the handwriting she recognized instantly. Michael Donovan's. Her eyes blurred before she even read the first sentence. Jennifer, if you're reading this, then I probably ran out of chances to tell you these things myself. Jennifer stopped, closed her eyes, took one slow breath, then continued. First, stop blaming yourself, she frowned. Thomas quietly smiled. He knew, Jennifer whispered. I never told anyone. Thomas nodded. He didn't need you to. Jennifer continued reading. You've been carrying guilt ever since that convoy attack. You think I saved your life? You're wrong. She blinked. Wrong. You would have done exactly the same thing for me. That's who you are. Don't let surviving become something you apologize for. Jennifer felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She hadn't cried when Michael disappeared. She hadn't cried during military funerals. She hadn't cried leaving the service, but now. A letter written 2 decades earlier had reached the one place nothing else ever had. Thomas quietly looked away. Giving her privacy, Jennifer continued. Second, promise me something. If I don't come home, don't waste your life looking backward. Go become the medic, the nurse, the teacher, whatever lets you keep saving people. You're too good at it to stop. Jennifer laughed softly through her tears. He knew. Thomas nodded. He always knew. The second page contained something unexpected, not advice, not military memories, a list, names, 23 of them. Jennifer frowned. What is this? Thomas leaned closer. The civilians. Jennifer looked again. Each name had a small note beside it. Mother of 3, teacher, farmer, 8-year-old boy. Grandmother, pregnant woman. Every civilian Michael's team had evacuated that day. Jennifer whispered. He wrote all of them down. Thomas smiled. He never wanted them to become statistics. Near the bottom of the page, one name had been circled. Fareed Hassan, age 11. Beside it, Michael had written, Gave him my seat. Jennifer closed her eyes. The wounded boy, the helicopter. It was all true. Then she unfolded the final page. The handwriting became noticeably rougher, almost hurried. One last thing. If I don't make it, don't remember me for the missions. Remember me for the people. Missions end. People keep living. Jennifer smiled through her tears. That sentence, that single sentence, explained Michael Donovan better than any military citation ever could. She reached the bottom, then froze. There was one final paragraph. One Thomas had clearly never read, because the envelope had remained sealed. Jennifer read it silently first, then looked at Thomas in disbelief. What? She slowly handed him the page. Read the last paragraph. Thomas adjusted his glasses. His eyes widened. No, he whispered. I never knew. Jennifer's voice trembled. He wrote that after the mission, he planned to retire. Thomas slowly nodded. He never told any of us. Jennifer looked back at the letter. Michael had already made his decision. He wasn't planning another deployment. He wasn't planning another mission. He was planning a life, one that never came. Thomas quietly folded the map inside the leather folder. I've got one more thing to show you. Jennifer looked up. I thought that was everything. Thomas slowly smiled. So did I. He reached into the very bottom of the folder, pulled out an old photograph. Not black and white. Color. The edges worn with age. Jennifer looked at it and immediately stopped breathing, standing beside Michael Donovan, smiling directly at the camera. Was a boy of about 11 years old, the same name Michael had circled in the letter, Fareed Hassan, and written across the back of the photograph, in fresh handwriting that definitely wasn't 20 years old, were 7 astonishing words. He's been looking for you for years. Jennifer stared at the photograph. Her eyes moved back and forth between the smiling boy and the words written across the back. He's been looking for you for years. She slowly looked up at Thomas. What does that mean? Thomas carefully took the photograph back. I didn't write those words. Jennifer frowned. Then who did? Thomas answered quietly. Fareed. Jennifer felt as though the room had become completely still. The boy survived? Thomas smiled. He did. Jennifer instinctively looked back at Michael's letter, the circled name, the helicopter seat. Everything suddenly became real, not just a story, a life, one that had continued for 20 years. Thomas reached into the folder once more. This time, he removed several recent photographs. The first showed a young man in his early 30s. Dark hair, confident smile, wearing hospital scrubs. Jennifer blinked. He's... Thomas nodded. A trauma surgeon. Jennifer laughed through another wave of tears. Of course. Thomas smiled. He says there was only one career he ever wanted. The next photograph showed the same man standing beside several children outside a modern medical clinic. Another showed him performing surgery. The final photograph stopped Jennifer completely. Fareed stood beside a memorial wall. In his hands, he held an enlarged photograph of Michael Donovan. Fresh flowers rested beneath it. Jennifer whispered, "He remembers." Thomas nodded. "Every year." Jennifer looked at Thomas. "How did you find him?" Thomas leaned back. "It actually started with him finding us." Jennifer listened. About 8 years ago, a humanitarian organization contacted the Department of Veterans Affairs. They were helping reunite civilians with soldiers who had saved them during the war. Jennifer's eyes widened. "And they found my name. I was one of the last surviving members of Michael's team." Thomas smiled. "When I answered the phone, the first thing they asked was, 'Do you remember a boy named Fareed Hassan?'" Jennifer already knew the answer. Thomas laughed softly, as if any of us could forget. Fareed had spent years searching, not because he wanted recognition, not because he wanted publicity, because he never had the chance to say thank you. After the helicopters finally returned the following morning, Michael and the remaining soldiers were gone. The camp had been abandoned. Fareed only knew one thing: a soldier had given him a seat on a helicopter, a decision that allowed him to grow up, to have a family, to become a doctor. Everything in his life had begun with one stranger's sacrifice. Jennifer quietly asked, "So why didn't anyone tell me?" Thomas sighed. "They tried, but military records were incomplete. You'd already left active service. There wasn't much paperwork connecting you anymore." He smiled apologetically. "It took years." Jennifer picked up the newest photograph again. Fareed looked almost exactly the age Michael had been when they first met. Life had completed a circle. The little boy Michael carried to safety now saved lives himself. Jennifer smiled. He kept the promise. Thomas looked confused. "What promise?" Jennifer unfolded Michael's letter. She pointed to one sentence. "Remember me for the people." She looked back at Fareed's picture. He did. Thomas slowly reached into his jacket pocket. "I've been saving the biggest surprise." Jennifer laughed. "I don't know if my heart can handle another one." Thomas grinned. "You'll manage." He handed her a folded piece of paper, an airline itinerary. Jennifer frowned. "What?" Then she saw the destination. Washington, D.C., departure. 2 weeks from today. She looked back at Thomas. "What is this?" Thomas smiled wider than she had yet seen. "Fareed's coming to America." Jennifer stared at him. "No, he already is." Thomas nodded. "He'll be speaking at the International Trauma Medicine Conference." Jennifer remembered seeing advertisements for it. Ashford Regional Hospital had even offered continuing education credits. She hadn't planned on attending. Thomas quietly added, "There's something else." Jennifer almost laughed. "There's more." "There is. He asked one question when I finally told him about you." "What question?" Thomas smiled. He said, "After all these years, does Jennifer Hamilton still help people?" Jennifer looked around the school health office. Bandages, ice packs, children's drawings taped to the wall, a half-finished health education poster. She smiled. "I guess I do." Thomas nodded proudly. "I told him exactly that." Just then, the office door opened slightly. "Nurse Jennifer." It was Ethan. I forgot my science project. He noticed the tears in Jennifer's eyes. Oh, I'm sorry. Jennifer smiled warmly. You don't have anything to apologize for. Ethan looked between his grandfather and Jennifer. So, did Grandpa answer your questions? Jennifer nodded. He answered more than I ever expected. Ethan grinned. Ah, good. He grabbed his project, then paused. My grandpa says some people save your life, even after they're gone. Jennifer looked toward Thomas. He simply smiled. Then Ethan ran back into the hallway. Jennifer quietly whispered, He's a smart kid. Thomas chuckled. He gets that from his grandmother. Jennifer looked once more at Farid's photograph, then at Michael's letter. Finally, she folded both carefully. For 20 years, she believed Michael Donovan's story had ended on a mountain. Now she understood something very different. His story hadn't ended. It had simply continued. Through every single life he had chosen to save. And in 2 weeks, she would finally meet one of them face to face. 2 weeks passed faster than Jennifer expected. She almost talked herself out of going. Twice. The International Trauma Medicine Conference wasn't far from Ashford, just a 90-minute flight to Washington, D.C. Still, she found every excuse imaginable. I'm too busy. The school needs me. Someone else can represent the district. None of them were true. Deep down, she knew exactly why she was hesitating. Some reunions felt easier as dreams than reality. Thomas Parker called the evening before her flight. You packed? Jennifer laughed. I'm working on it. No, you're avoiding it. She smiled. You know me too well. Thomas became quiet. Jennifer, Michael would have wanted this. She looked toward the old dog tag resting on her bedside table. I know. So go. The conference filled an enormous convention center. Doctors, nurses, military medics, paramedics, researchers from around the world. Jennifer suddenly felt very small among thousands of medical professionals. She checked the program. Keynote speaker, Dr. Farid Hassan, trauma surgeon and humanitarian medical director. She quietly found a seat near the back. Not because she wanted to hide, because she wasn't sure what she would do if emotions overwhelmed her. The auditorium lights dimmed. A man in his early 30s walked onto the stage. Jennifer recognized him immediately. The little boy from the photograph, only older, confident, calm. He adjusted the microphone. Good morning. His English carried only the slightest trace of an accent. I've been asked to speak today about trauma medicine. He smiled. But before medicine, I'd like to tell you a story. Jennifer's heartbeat quickened. When I was 11 years old, my village became a battlefield. The enormous auditorium fell completely silent. I remember explosions. I remember fear. I remember believing my mother and I would die. He paused, then soldiers arrived. Jennifer already knew every word. Still, she couldn't look away. They built a medical station. They treated everyone. They gave children water before they drank themselves. They carried strangers before carrying their own equipment. He smiled softly. I only remember one soldier clearly. Jennifer felt tears already forming. He smiled even when everyone else looked afraid. He gave me chocolate. The audience laughed gently. He wrapped my injured leg. And when there was only one seat left on the rescue helicopter, Farid paused. He picked me. The auditorium became silent again. I never saw him again. Jennifer quietly lowered her head. Farid continued. I spent 20 years wondering how someone could give away their own chance to live. For a child he had never met. He looked across the audience. I eventually realized something. He wasn't choosing between his life and mine. He was choosing between hope and fear. And hope won. The audience erupted into applause. Jennifer couldn't clap. She simply sat quietly, remembering Michael's smile, exactly as Farid described it. The presentation ended. People gathered around Farid almost immediately. Doctors asking questions. Journalists requesting interviews. Conference organizers congratulating him. Jennifer remained where she was. Watching, she wasn't sure whether she should interrupt. Then, Fareed looked across the room, straight toward her, almost as though he'd known exactly where she'd been sitting. His expression changed. Recognition. Not because he'd met her, because Thomas had shown him photographs. He quietly excused himself from everyone around him, then walked directly toward Jennifer. Neither of them spoke at first. Fareed stopped a few feet away. "You must be Jennifer Hamilton." She nodded slowly. "And you, are the little boy Michael wrote about." Fareed smiled. "He talked about me." Jennifer carefully removed the folded letter from her bag. "He carried your name for 20 years. Fareed's eyes filled instantly. "You have it." Jennifer handed him the page listing the civilians. His fingers stopped at one line. "Fareed Hassan, age 11, beside it." Gave him my seat. Fareed gently touched the handwriting, as though afraid it might disappear. For several long moments, neither of them could speak. Finally, Fareed quietly asked, "What was he really like?" Jennifer laughed softly through tears. "He never let anyone eat alone." Fareed smiled. Jennifer continued, "He remembered everyone's birthday. He could fix almost anything. He was terrible at singing." Fareed laughed. "And?" Jennifer smiled wider. "He believed every life mattered equally. No matter whose life it was." Fareed nodded. "That sounds exactly like the man I remembered." Jennifer looked at him carefully. "You became a surgeon." Fareed smiled. "Because of him." He paused. "And because of you." Jennifer looked confused. "Me?" Thomas eventually told him everything. About the convoy, about Michael carrying her to safety years before, about the medic who survived, about the school nurse still helping children every day. Fareed smiled warmly. "So?" "In a way. He saved 2 medical careers that day." Jennifer laughed. "I never thought about it like that." Fareed reached into his briefcase. "I brought something." He carefully removed a framed photograph. It showed dozens of smiling people standing outside a modern hospital overseas. Doctors, nurses, children, families. Across the bottom, a bronze plaque read, "The Michael Donovan Children's Trauma Center." Jennifer covered her mouth. Fareed smiled. "It opened last year," she whispered. "You named an entire hospital after him." Fareed shook his head gently. "No, I named Hope after him." Jennifer realized Michael Donovan had never disappeared. Not really. His kindness had simply traveled farther than either of them had ever imagined. And somehow, 20 years later, it had brought 2 strangers together, who had both spent their lives honoring the same extraordinary man. After the conference ended, Jennifer and Fareed walked outside together. The evening air was cool. Washington's streets buzzed with traffic only a few blocks away. Neither of them seemed in any hurry to leave. For the first time, they weren't talking about the past. They were simply talking. Fareed smiled. "Thomas told me you're a school nurse." Jennifer nodded. "I am." "You miss emergency medicine?" She thought about it. "Sometimes. I miss the teamwork. I don't miss watching families lose people." Fareed understood immediately. He nodded slowly. "I still work trauma. Some nights. I wonder how Michael carried that weight for so many years." Jennifer smiled softly. "He never carried it alone." Fareed looked curious. "What do you mean?" Jennifer laughed. "He talked. He checked on people. He made us laugh. He believed strength wasn't pretending everything was fine. It was making sure nobody suffered by themselves." Fareed looked down thoughtfully. "I've been trying to teach that to my residents." Jennifer smiled. "Then you're teaching exactly what he would have wanted." Before they said goodbye, Fareed handed Jennifer a small envelope. "I almost forgot." She looked at him. "What's this?" "A copy of every photograph we have." "And," he smiled, "a request." Jennifer opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation. Annual Michael Donovan Humanitarian Medical Scholarship. She looked confused. Fareed explained. "Every year, we sponsor one nursing student. Someone who wants to work in disaster medicine or emergency care." Jennifer smiled. "That's wonderful." Fareed nodded. We'd like you to choose the first recipient. Jennifer looked genuinely surprised. Me? You knew him? You've spent your life doing exactly what he believed in. I can't think of anyone else. Jennifer quietly accepted the invitation. I'd be honored. A month later, Ashford Middle School held its annual career day. Doctors, police officers, firefighters, engineers, teachers, parents volunteered to speak about their professions. Jennifer almost skipped it. She never liked talking about herself, Principal Harris insisted. The students adore you, Jennifer laughed. They adore free bandages. When her turn came, 30 curious 7th graders looked at her. One student raised his hand immediately. Nurse Jennifer. Were you always a nurse? Jennifer smiled. No. What did you do before? For a moment, she thought about telling the whole story. Special operations. Combat medicine. Michael Donovan, the dog tag. Instead, she reached into her pocket. The worn dog tag rested in her palm. She held it up. I learned something important from someone. The room became quiet. He taught me that every person matters. No exceptions. She looked around at the students. You don't have to wear a uniform to protect people. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be the strongest person in the room. Another student asked, So how do you protect people? Jennifer smiled. You notice them. You help them. You stand beside them. Sometimes. That's enough to change someone's entire life. None of the students knew she wasn't just giving advice. She was passing along someone else's legacy. That afternoon, Ethan Parker stopped by the health office. Nurse Jennifer. She looked up. Yes? He smiled. My grandpa says thanks. Jennifer laughed. For what? For proving he kept his promise. Jennifer glanced toward the framed photograph now sitting beside her desk. Michael Donovan, Thomas Parker, their old special operations team. Beside it, a newer photograph, Fareed Hassan, standing proudly outside the Michael Donovan Children's Trauma Center. She smiled. No, she answered quietly. He kept his. Years later, the first recipient of the Michael Donovan Humanitarian Scholarship graduated from nursing school. Then another, and another. Some became trauma nurses, others joined search and rescue teams. Several volunteered in disaster zones around the world. None of them had ever met Michael Donovan. Most never knew his full story. Yet every one of them carried a small card inside their graduation packet. On it were words copied directly from the letter Michael had written more than 20 years earlier. Don't remember me for the missions. Remember me for the people. Missions end. People keep living. One ordinary school morning, a new student walked nervously into the health office. First day. Scared. Homesick, Jennifer smiled exactly the way Michael used to. Hi. I'm Nurse Jennifer. The child smiled back, and just like that, without speeches, without medals, without anyone noticing. The kindness Michael Donovan had shown one frightened medic decades earlier continued to ripple through another life, and another, because courage may save a life, but kindness can echo for generations.